30 years after abandoning her newborn triplets at a dump site, Annabel returns to Nigeria, childless, divorced, and burdened by a secret she can no longer carry. But the day she arrives is the day the woman who raised her sons dies. Now, standing at the grave of the mother she never became, Annabel must face the men her sons have grown into, and the wreckage of the choice that changed all their lives. Will they forgive her? Will they accept her? And can love be born again, even after being buried for decades? The sun had barely risen when Annabel returned to the tiny flat she had hidden in for months. Her footsteps were slow, mechanical, the echoes of early morning muffled by her own heavy breathing. The wrapper she used to carry the basket now dragged behind her, damp with morning dew and speckled with the dust of a road she couldn't even remember walking. Her hands were empty. Her arms felt naked. Her womb, though no longer swollen, still ached, as if it knew what had been done. She reached her front door, fumbled with the key, and pushed it open. The silence inside was louder than the outside world. She closed the door behind her, slid down to the floor, and folded into herself. She wept. Not quietly, not gracefully. She screamed through gritted teeth, clutching her empty stomach as though the babies were still there, as though she could call them back by force. Her cries were primal, choking sobs that tore from the deepest part of her. She pressed her palms to her ears, trying to block out the sound of phantom cries that weren't there, but wouldn't stop echoing in her mind. "I had no choice," she whispered to no one, over and over again. "I had no choice. I had no choice." But the words rang hollow in the tiny room. Hours passed. The sky outside turned from indigo to blue. Still, she sat on the floor, back against the door, eyes swollen and voice hoarse. The weight of her decision pressed down like concrete. Yet something colder, something crueler began to take root inside her, a survival instinct sharpened by fear and pride. She wiped her face, stood slowly, and walked to the cracked mirror above the sink. Her face was pale, hollow, a ghost of who she used to be. Her fingers traced her jawline. "I can't let them see me like this," she muttered. "I can't go back broken. I have to get my life back." Later that evening, she received a phone call. It was her father, Chief Damian Wilson. "Annabel," he said with a voice laced in pride and celebration. "We just closed the international deal with that Dubai firm. You won't believe the figures." She said nothing, just listened. "And I've been thinking, since you're on your own now, trying to make something of yourself, maybe it's time you had some control of your own finances." Her heart began to race. "I've transferred 15 million Nigerian nairas to your account. Take care of yourself, baby girl. Enjoy. Make us proud." Click. The phone slipped from her hand and landed on the floor with a soft thud. She stared at the wall, stunned. 15 million naira. It felt like the universe was giving her a sign. A lifeline. A reward for doing the hard thing, no matter how ugly it was. She stood up straighter. That same night, she packed her things. She left the small flat before dawn, traveled to Lagos, and checked into a serviced apartment in Lekki Phase 1. No one asked questions. No one knew her past. She paid 6 months up front, walked barefoot on white tile floors, and took a hot shower for the first time in weeks. As the water poured over her body, she closed her eyes and whispered to the tiled wall. "It's over. No one needs to know." Over the next few weeks, Annabel disappeared into luxury. She hired a personal trainer, a skin therapist, a private chef. She drank herbal teas, soaked in imported bath salts, and filtered her life through a curated lens of healing and rebirth. Her weight dropped. Her glow returned. She filled her wardrobe with new clothes, blocked old contacts, and turned her pain into ambition. And yet, each night when she lay in bed, when the city lights outside flickered like distant stars, her mind betrayed her. She would hear them crying again. Would they survive? Did someone find them? Were they still alive? She would sit up in the dark, stare at the ceiling, and whisper questions she never dared say aloud in daylight. There were times she almost hired a private investigator, almost sent an anonymous inquiry to the local authorities, almost went back. But then she would see her reflection in the mirror, flawless, polished, untouchable. And she would remind herself, you're a daughter of power. A name. A brand. You can't go back there. Not now. Not ever. So she pressed the questions down like thorns under silk. She told herself they were better off, whoever had found them. She told herself that silence was mercy. And for 3 months, she convinced herself she was healing. But her soul knew the truth. She hadn't escaped anything. She had simply delayed the reckoning. 3 months had passed. 3 months of curated silence and spotless spaces. Annabel had perfected the art of moving on, or so it seemed. In the polished halls of her luxury apartment, her heels clicked confidently. The staff at the complex called her Madam. The grocery store attendants recognized her face and gave her the VIP aisle treatment. She smiled often, laughed when expected. Her clothes were pressed, her skin glowed, her hair flowed like silk. On the outside, she was the image of a woman reborn. But inside, she was stitched together with shame, pride, and fear, each thread threatening to snap at the slightest tug of truth. Each day, she rehearsed her return home. She told herself she was ready, strong, healthy again. She would walk through those gates, chin up, and tell her parents she had failed the course. So what? She'd try another. A different career. A different path. She could already hear her mother's sigh. Her father's narrowed eyes. But she had prepared for this. She had practiced the script. And so one sunny afternoon she did it. She packed her clothes into sleek suitcases, flagged a luxury taxi, and made the quiet journey back to her parents' estate in Ikoyi. When the gates opened, her heart thudded. The driver honked, and the security guard squinted, surprised. "Madam is back," the man said under his breath. She gave a tight smile. Her mother was the first to come out, wearing a silk kimono and high expectations. Her eyes lit up at Annabel's appearance. "You look fantastic." "I feel better," Annabel replied softly. Her father arrived moments later, phone to his ear, stepping down from his upstairs office. "Ah, you're back. How was the course?" "I didn't pass," she said without flinching. He paused. Silence stretched thin. She stood tall, waiting. Eventually, he nodded slowly. "Then we try again. But differently this time." Her mother sighed. "You know your father and I have been discussing options for you." Annabel tensed. "A man," her mother said plainly. "Successful. Well-traveled. Based in Houston. From a good family. Ready to marry." Annabel blinked. "You want to marry me off?" Her father finally looked at her, phone now in his pocket. "This game of trial and error has gone on too long, Annabel. You're 23. You've disgraced us enough with the lifestyle you lived. Now it's time to restore your place." She wanted to scream, to tell them about the children, about the pain, the birth, the abandonment, but the words shrank back into her throat like frightened birds. "Fine," she said. And just like that, her fate was sealed again. The marriage was beautiful, externally. Lush decor, imported flowers, high-profile guests. Her face appeared in society pages. Billionaire's daughter ties the knot in star-studded ceremony. Her new husband, Nelson Peterson, was wealthy, calculating, and distant. He preferred business meetings over date nights. His affection was strategic. His love, transactional. But Annabel didn't mind. She was used to performance. She moved to Houston, hosted dinners, took pictures, spoke with practiced elegance. She tried to get pregnant again and again. But nothing happened. Doctors in America gave her answers she had tried to bury for years. Scar tissue, they said. Trauma to the uterus. Possibly from an unmonitored birth. They spoke gently, kindly, but their words stabbed through her like hot needles. Nelson grew impatient. For years later, he married a second wife, a younger woman with a soft laugh and a flat stomach. Within the first year, the second wife bore him twins. The year after, a third child. Annabel had dinner alone most nights. The house was full, yet hollow. By the time she turned 50, she and Nelson barely spoke. They divorced quietly. Her name was removed from the foundation she had helped him build. Her parents back home said little. They didn't understand infertility, or failure, or wounds that don't bleed but still kill. Alone in her glass-walled apartment, Annabel would stare at the photos of Nelson's children, 3 of them, and feel the universe mocking her. 3. Again. Only this time they weren't hers. And the ones who had been she had cast away like trash. One night, she sat by her bedroom window, eyes unfocused, heart aching. She opened her journal, a new habit, one of the only things that brought her some peace. She wrote one line. If they're still alive, I want them to know. I'm sorry. The next morning, she packed 2 suitcases, booked a flight to Lagos, and left without telling anyone. She was done running. She didn't care about what the world would say. She needed to know. She needed to find them. Even if they hated her. Even if it broke her again. Because for once in her life, she wasn't doing this for image, for applause, or approval. She was doing it because her soul would never rest until she faced the truth. The plane touched down in Port Harcourt with a dull shudder. As the aircraft taxied along the runway, Annabel gripped the armrest beside her. Her diamond ring had long been removed. Her nails were bare. Her hair pulled into a simple bun. No makeup. No glamour. Just a tired woman wrapped in silence, 40,000 feet of regret behind her, and a reckoning waiting on the ground. She stepped off the plane with a heart that felt older than her body. The same city that once held her secrets now welcomed her with heat, noise, and memories she couldn't outrun. The ride from the airport to the town was quiet. She didn't look out the window much. She didn't need to. The roads may have changed, buildings taller, street signs newer, but guilt aged in a way nothing else did. It never faded. It never forgot. The car finally slowed down as they neared the old community. It looked different, cleaner than she remembered, with paved walkways where broken stones used to sit, but the soul of the place was the same. Children ran barefoot. Women laughed under trees with wrappers tied around their waists. Life had gone on. As they turned onto a narrow lane where the air smelled of pepper stew and red dust, the driver rolled down his window to ask an older woman for directions. "Excuse me, Mama," he said. "We're looking for a woman named Ebel," the woman interrupted, squinting. "You're too late." Annabel looked up sharply. "Too late. She died this morning," the woman said. "Just before dawn. Her boys just took her body to the funeral home." The car fell silent. Annabel's throat went dry. Her chest caved in. She opened the door before the driver could park and stepped out, her shoes sinking slightly into soft earth. The air turned heavier. "She died today?" Annabel asked, voice faint. The woman looked her over, her face unreadable. "Yes. She was sick only a few days. It was quick, but peaceful." Tears filled Annabel's eyes. She had come back. But the woman who had taken in what she left behind, the woman who mothered her sons, had just slipped from the world. That grief was unfamiliar. It wasn't about loss. It was about what she would never be able to say now. "Do you know the boys?" Annabel asked, trying to steady herself. Are they well?" The woman studied her a moment longer. "They're more than well," she finally said. "They are men now. Men of names and honor. One's a doctor. One owns buildings. One runs something with computers I don't understand." A tiny sob broke from Annabel's lips. "They survived," she whispered. "They did more than survive," the woman said softly. "They became." Annabel stayed in a small hotel that night. She didn't eat. She didn't shower. She sat by the window, staring at the stars that poked through the city's haze. That woman, Mama Ebel, had done what she herself couldn't. And now she was gone. The funeral came 3 days later. Annabel didn't attend. She couldn't. She watched from a distance, behind a parked van with tinted windows. The casket was simple but elegant. The crowd was thick. People cried, danced, prayed. Her boys, stood tall, dressed in fine agbatas, their grief raw and real. Each of them gave a speech that tore something inside her. "Everything we are," said Kelvin, voice cracking, "we owe to her." "She taught us love not with words," said Ken, "but with sacrifice." "She never called herself a hero," said Elijah, eyes red. But that's what she was. Annabel clutched her chest and wept. They were men now. Men who carried sorrow with dignity. Men she did not know. The next day, she returned to the graveside alone. The air was still. The grass not yet grown over the fresh mound of soil. She knelt down, resting her hand on the earth. "I don't know if you can hear me," she whispered, her voice trembling, "but I owe you more than I can ever repay." She paused. "You took what I abandoned and turned them into greatness. You didn't owe them anything, but you gave them everything." Her tears darkened the soil. "I came back too late," she choked. "But I'm here now, and if there's any justice in the world, they'll know you were their real mother. They'll honor you forever." She lowered her head to the grave. "Thank you." Behind her, footsteps approached softly. She turned. The three men stood there, silent, eyes locked on her. She rose to her feet, her body shaking. "I'm sorry," she said immediately. "I didn't plan for this. I didn't know how to." Her voice broke. "I'm your mother." The words hung in the air. None of them moved. None of them spoke. Then Kelvin, the first to break the silence, said quietly, "We know. We felt it." Annabel stood frozen, caught between 3 grown men and 30 years of silence. The wind picked up slightly, rustling the trees around the small cemetery. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell rang out. But here, in this intimate space of truth and burial, everything else fell away. She clutched her scarf like armor, her fingers trembling. Her eyes scanned their faces, Kelvin, Ken, Elijah. Each so different, yet so unmistakably hers. But it wasn't just resemblance. It was something deeper. They carried her blood, but Ebel's strength. Their silence stretched long. Each one seemed to hold back a dam. "I didn't come here for pity," she said, barely able to keep her voice from breaking. "I came to say thank you. To her. And to try." Kelvin's brow was furrowed, his expression unreadable. He was the one she feared most. The one whose eyes held the weight of knowledge. Of memory. Of pain matured into principles. "We never thought you'd return," he said simply. Annabel dropped her gaze. "I never thought I would either." "Why now?" Elijah asked, his voice deeper than she remembered. Measured. Grounded. "Because I'm alone," she admitted. "Because I have nothing to offer anymore, except truth. I thought success could replace the guilt. I thought if I just kept moving, I could forget." She looked at the grave behind her. "But I never did." Ken stepped forward slightly. Not aggressive, curious. "Searching. You left us. We could have died. Why did you really come back? To make peace before your own grave." Annabel's eyes filled again. "Maybe," she whispered. "Maybe I just needed to be told I was wrong. Maybe I needed to say it out loud. I made the worst mistake of my life. I was young, afraid, proud. And I have lived in the prison of that choice for 30 years." None of the men responded immediately. But they didn't walk away either. That, to her, was a mercy she hadn't earned. She reached into her bag and pulled out a folded piece of old cloth. It was faded, torn at the edge, a piece of the wrapper she had used to line the basket the morning she left them. "I kept this," she said, her voice trembling. "All these years." Kelvin looked at it, then at her. It was the smallest crack. But it was a crack. "You don't have to accept me," she continued. "She was your real mother. She earned that name. I don't want to take her place. I couldn't. I never could. But if there's any space left, even just a corner, I want to be in your lives. However you'll let me." Silence fell again. Ken finally turned toward the grave. He knelt down, placed his hand gently on the soil, then looked back at her. "You're right," he said softly. "She was our real mother." Elijah looked at Annabel for a long moment. "But we came from you." Annabel nodded, too ashamed to speak. Kelvin walked past her, pausing at the edge of the path. "Let's go," he said to his brothers. They followed him. Then he turned, just once, to face her again. "If you want to try," he said, "we won't stop you. But it won't be easy. We're not boys anymore." Annabel placed her hand over her chest. "I wouldn't ask for easy." He nodded once. And just like that, they left. But something sacred had cracked open. Not a reunion, but a beginning. That night, back in her hotel room, Annabel sat with the old wrapper folded on her lap. She stared at it for hours. She didn't cry. Not this time. Because for the first time in decades, she had not been rejected. Not yet embraced. But not discarded. And in that fragile space in between, something bloomed quietly. Hope. Weeks passed. Not many words were spoken at first. Not over the phone. Not in person. Not in public. But something had been uncorked that day at the graveside. An invisible thread now drawn between Annabel and the three men she had once abandoned. It began with a message from Ken. I heard you're in Lagos. If you're around this weekend, I'm launching a rural telemedicine hub in Ikorodu. You can come if you want. She read the message 3 times before replying. I would be honored. That Saturday, Annabel dressed in a simple ivory gown. No jewelry. No lashes. No fanfare. She arrived at the event early, sitting quietly near the back, unnoticed by most. But Ken saw her. And for the first time he nodded. Not cold. Not warm. But human. After the program, she stayed behind to congratulate him. He thanked her politely and introduced her to a few colleagues as someone who helped shape my beginnings. It was an acknowledgement, but it wasn't erasure either. A few days later, Elijah called her. His voice was casual, hesitant. I'm opening a new development in Surulere. It's affordable housing. You might want to see it. She went, walked the site in flats and a headscarf, listened as he explained the structural improvements, the flood protection features, and how one block would be named after Ebel. Annabel touched the wall with her fingers. She would be so proud of you. Elijah glanced at her, his eyes softer now. She was the reason I built anything at all. Then he added, after a pause, but you gave us life. That night, Annabel cried alone in her hotel bed. Not from pain, but from the slow, quiet miracle of being let in. Kelvin was last. And the hardest. The walls he built were higher, thicker, layered with intellect and the kind of trauma that doesn't cry. It remembers. It documents. He didn't speak to her for over a month after the graveside encounter. But one day, as she walked out of a small bookshop in Lekki, she saw him waiting by her car. He held out a copy of a medical journal. Inside was an article he'd written, Maternal Abandonment and Psychological Recovery in Adult Males. He handed it to her. I thought you might want to read it, he said. She took it, surprised, speechless. Is it about you? She asked quietly. No, he said. But it could have been. They stood in silence. Then he added, I don't know if I can forgive you, but I'm not angry anymore. That's something, right? She nodded, swallowing a sob. It's everything. As the months rolled on, the distance between them continued to shrink, not through grand gestures, but small, intentional steps. They began to visit her, one at a time. She cooked for them, awkwardly at first, until Elijah showed her how to properly steam ugwu. They laughed over her bad seasoning. Ken taught her to use the apps on her new phone. Kelvin surprised her with a framed photo of the 3 of them, taken as toddlers by a neighbor Mama Ebel once trusted. She had never seen them like that. She pressed the frame to her heart. I missed all of this, she whispered. We didn't, Ken replied. She gave us everything. Annabel never tried to replace her. She never asked them to call her Mama. But on one visit, when they left her apartment, she overheard Kelvin say to the others, I'll text her when we get home, just so she's not alone. Not Annabel. Her. One evening, they invited her to a quiet dinner. The table was simple. No photographers. No guests. Just the 4 of them. She wore a modest wine-colored dress and brought along a handwritten letter addressed to Mama Ebel. She had written it weeks ago, unsure if she'd ever have the strength to read it aloud. Halfway through the meal, Elijah asked gently, Do you ever wish you had kept us? She looked at them, strong, brilliant, compassionate men. I wish I had been the kind of woman who could, she said, tears shining in her eyes. But I wasn't, and I've had to carry that failure every day since. The table was silent. Then Kelvin raised his glass. To the woman who raised us with her hands, he said, voice low, and to the one who raised us with her regret. Ken lifted his glass too, to the courage it took to leave, and the greater courage it took to come back. Elijah clinked glasses with them. To healing. They turned to her. She raised her own glass. And for the first time in 30 years, she smiled. Not the kind that hid pain, but the kind that came from a soul unburdened. It had been nearly a year since Annabel knelt at Mama Ebel's grave and confessed her truth. And in that time, something extraordinary had begun. Not loud, not dramatic, but slow and certain. A family healing itself from the inside out. The bond between Annabel and the triplets wasn't the bond of bedtime stories, scraped knees, or school uniforms. It wasn't forged in lullabies or lunchboxes. It was built from harder things: forgiveness, honesty, and time. Annabel moved out of her hotel and into a small but elegant flat on the mainland, not too far from Kelvin's hospital, close enough to Ken's tech hub, and just one bus ride from Elijah's estate office. She didn't live with them, and she never asked to. But they came often, on their own terms. On Sundays, they would take turns dropping by. Sometimes they brought umla, sometimes just gist. And sometimes, on rare, tender evenings, they brought memories. Do you remember when we tried to trap the rat with rice and milk? Elijah laughed once, leaning against her kitchen counter. Annabel smiled, her heart twisting in quiet grief and gratitude. I wasn't there, but I can imagine it now. They never pretended she was part of the past, but they invited her into the present. One evening, Ken came alone. He brought an envelope, old and yellowed, with 3 folded pages inside. Mama Ebel wrote this, he said, for our 18th birthday. We just never read it until recently. Annabel hesitated before opening it. The handwriting was soft, slanted, full of love. My boys, if you ever find your mother, tell her thank you. She gave me the greatest gift I never expected. I don't know what led her to leave, but I forgive her. I pray one day you do too, because forgiveness is a doorway, and what's behind it is freedom. Annabel pressed the pages to her chest. I don't deserve her kindness, she whispered. Ken smiled faintly. Neither did we. But she gave it anyway. Months later, Kelvin's daughter was born. They named her Ebel Grace Kelvin. Annabel visited the hospital with trembling hands and a gift-wrapped baby shawl, embroidered with small white stars. She's beautiful, she whispered, holding the baby for the first time. Kelvin stood beside her, hands in his pockets, watching her carefully. She'll know who you are, he said softly. Annabel looked up, startled. I don't mean your title, he added. She'll know your story, what you lost, what you found, and what you're still becoming. As the years passed, Annabel began to bloom in new ways. She volunteered at a shelter for abandoned children, quietly, without drawing attention. She read to toddlers. She changed diapers. She wiped tears. It didn't erase what she had done, but it became a part of her redemption. One evening, as she sat on her small veranda with a cup of tea, the triplets arrived, unannounced, carrying food and laughter and noise that filled her home like a bomb. They talked until it grew dark. Kelvin pulled out old pictures. Ken made tea. Elijah sang a bad imitation of a church hymn and made them all laugh until their stomachs hurt. Annabel looked at them, their faces lit by lamplight, their eyes soft with history. She didn't speak. She just watched, because this was the moment she never thought she would have. Not acceptance. Not restoration. Family. Later that night, as they left, Elijah lingered by the door. We don't say it much, he said, rubbing the back of his neck. But we're glad you came back. Annabel swallowed. So am I. He paused, then added, You may not be Mama Ebel, but you're still ours. In a different way. She nodded, heart swelling. And you boys, she said softly, are the only thing I ever got right, because I gave you to the right woman. He smiled and stepped out into the night. She closed the door gently, turned off the lights, and sat in the quiet glow of the lamp. There was no music, no applause, no end credits, just the sound of healing, growing, living, and the roots of love, buried deep, surviving everything. We have come to the end of the story. I hope you enjoyed it. Leave a like and subscribe to my YouTube channel for more interesting stories.